I think skepticism is a great impulse, but naked of any context or like as a foundational impulse or virtue, it's nothing. Like it's just kind of aimless and wandering.
Hey. Welcome to another episode of Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world. We decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori.
And we're going to get into it today. Today is going to be a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit of levity in this world of cynicism and cultural pessimism. So today we're going to talk about some weird shit, some conspiracy theory shit, flat earth shit, and why people believe in that weird stuff. But before we get into that, we're going to start off this episode as we start off every episode with the Shitty Minute, where one of us gets to rant about whatever it is that is chapping our hide for the week. And this week, it is Troy's turn to rant. So, T-Roy, the stage is yours.
All right, my Shitty Minute this week has to do with my own personal experiences, and that's that if you're aware, I live in Los Angeles, thereabouts, and LA has experienced an utter deluge of water and rain and storm and craziness over the weekend. Some have even called it the worst storm in the history of Southern California, something like that. I don't know if that's accurate at all. It was definitely bad. I can remember maybe 2 or 3 times in my life that I've lived in Los Angeles where it's felt kind of similar. And the flooding has been sort of similar, but so it may be around, top five of the last 30 years or so, maybe, just from my own experience. I made the mistake of being like, everyone's freaking out. This is going to be nothing. I've driven in the rain before, not a big deal. So I went out on Friday. That was a poor decision. The San Fernando Valley, which is close to where I grew up, was pretty horrifically flooded to the point where whenever some asshole decided to drive 40 miles an hour in a 35 zone, they'd splash water on your windshield and you couldn't see anything for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And you'd float through intersections and the whole deal. So it was pretty nasty. Now, my Shitty Minute, that's the context. My Shitty Minute is actually just about cars in general. Because it kind of came to me, and you know me, I have this diatribe fairly regularly where I talk about cars being possibly the worst invention mankind has ever developed, like up there with nuclear weapons. And nuclear weapons are mostly about potential disaster. Cars are about actual disaster. And I was thinking, you think about the sort of, I don't know what you call it, like whiny capital. I'm creating a term here, where the amount of energy and resources we put into whining about a thing that hurts us. So, look at the things that cause the most deaths in America. Heart disease is number 1, right? How much whiny capital do we use on stuff related to heart disease? Like a shit ton, right? There's like a social complex of guilt whenever you want to go eat like a hamburger or a cheeseburger because you joke about how it's clogging your arteries because you have to release the tension of the guilt.
And if you don't have a gym membership, there's a guilt that's placed upon you.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then obviously the amount of actual capital and resources we use to try and combat poor diets and exercise and health and the whole thing it's incredible, right? So much. And yet cars are like, what, 2nd or 3rd on the list? Automobile accidents as a killer? And the amount of time we spend whining about that is basically nothing. Now, I know that automobile accidents have sort of steadily decreased over the past 10, 20 years, but it's certainly not like an enormous decrease. It's not one of those things that's like we would be surprised if it trended the other way at some point. And I wonder how much of that's just because there are fewer people can afford to drive as much, given the recession and the whole thing. I don't know the details behind all that, but it's pretty incredible.
It's probably increased safety measures in cars as well, right? I mean, they're a lot safer now than they were in the 70s when Pintos were fucking blowing up because they were getting
blown up, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure that has a part in it too. But still, it's a pretty incredibly dangerous thing. And we freak out when a plane crashes once every 5 years, but then hundreds of thousands of people die from car accidents, and we don't even bat an eye. It's just an accepted part of life. And I'm thinking, can you imagine if we just never invented cars? how much better the world would be. We wouldn't have built cities with infrastructure that needs to have cars, right? And are built around traveling through the personal automobile, let alone the environmental impact that they have. That basically we've decided that car manufacturers are so important to society that we'll bail them out like their banks. I'm not saying we shouldn't have done that with GM and stuff, but just it tells you that they're sort of a sacred object in American culture in a way. And I came up with this analogy that I was thinking there's a little bit of validity to, although I do admit there's going to be some issue here, and we can talk about it for a second. I want to sort of bring to a sort of a parallel analysis the way we treat guns and the way we treat cars. Because, especially from the left. Because guns, obviously if you're a liberal on the left, most likely you're going to be for gun control. And you're going to not like the sort of gun culture in many parts of America. And guns are a large part of many, many deaths. Obviously, guns don't kill people by themselves, but they're, we didn't have guns, and many countries that don't have guns have much lower rates of homicide and suicide and whatnot. And we don't have to get into all the details about that right now. But guns were a sacred object in parts of America, and they're not a sacred object in others. And the parts where they're not a sacred object, they're treated like we really shouldn't have this many of them. There's no point to it. It's ridiculous. And I agree with that. But then cars, in a similar way, cars don't individually decide to kill people in the same way guns don't. But cars are an instrumental part of lots of people's deaths, unnecessarily. Sometimes from people being assholes, sometimes just because cars are giant death machines and you can't control them. And things happen, especially when it's raining outside like crazy. Mm-hmm. And we treat them like sacred objects, and we're just like, well, whatever. I guess those are just deaths we have to accept because, everyone needs to have their own personal flying, rolling death machine. So I just wonder, now, why don't we treat cars like we treat guns? Like, we should really curb this. We should do everything we can to invest in changing our public infrastructure in cities so that we don't have to have cars. Like, that would be one of the greatest ways to spend our cultural, physical, and whiny capital, I feel like.
Dude, I'm 100% on board with that.
No, I admit that there's an issue there, in the sense that guns, the reason why we tend to freak out a lot about guns is because they don't serve much of a purpose other than to kill things. Now, obviously, if you're a hunter or whatever, that's different, and so you use that for other things. But if you use it for protection, you're more likely to, use that gun on yourself or a family member, or someone else will on your family member, than you will on a perpetrator. So that's a bit of an issue there, right? Whereas cars serve much greater purpose than that. They have much more utility than that. I understand that.
Sure.
Fully cognizant of that key dissimilarity in my analogical argument here. Still, they cause way more deaths than guns do. Way more. Or a part of a cause, and way more deaths. So I think that makes up for the fact of the utility they provide, let alone the fact that guns don't cause climate change, as far as I know.
But maybe the manufacturer of guns does. But no, I mean, that aside, I think the usefulness of the analogy is in the sacredness of the item that is embedded in the particular context. So, yeah, you can imagine an alternative reality where the assembly line was never invented, or if it was invented under different conditions for the development of public transportation, then the construction of cities. Well, but let me think about this. I was going to say the construction of cities would have been different, and they would have, but cars are sort of the flower to the bud of horses, right? And then carriages, and then wagons and things like that. So in that sense, it's almost like the spirit of the car was already existent, although different, in horse-drawn carriages, no? So cities were already starting to be constructed around the horse-drawn carriage. So you'd have to maybe even go back further and start to try to think about there's a different type of spirit. So I think that the development of cars, the sacredness of cars, is so embedded that you kind of have to almost develop like a completely different bizarro world,
Yeah, that's true. And then I think you're right that it's the spirit and the sacredness of individualism that's really to blame, and the cause of this. sort of issue we're facing now. At the same time, it's really easy to change the infrastructure of dirt roads that horses walk on.
Yeah, true.
Whereas
very true.
it's not easy to change the infrastructure of entire cities with buildings surrounding roads that you 100%. Can't really change without massive public investment.
Now, I know that he's not exactly your man crush, but Elon Musk is developing that Hyperloop program. Have you heard about that? The competition that he has opened up?
Vaguely, but you have to remind me.
Basically, he has an idea that he patented, and then he has outsourced a competition to anybody who can develop this idea. I believe that he still retains the patent, but he has this competition that's opened up for anyone who can really develop this idea. Then there will be like some sort of significant financial investment to further develop their idea. So you have all these corporations. A friend of mine, her boyfriend is the founder of one of these companies. They're called like Hyperloop. Oh shit, she's gonna kill me. It's like Hyperloop Technology Industries. They're one of the big three. There are three big ones, and he's basically one of the founders and CEOs of this company. And they're already developing this. Basically, it's like an air hockey table. It's a low pressure air cylinder in which either like a magnetized or some other type of capsule on the inside carries passengers from point A to point B at a very high rate, anywhere from like 800 to like 1,200 miles per hour. And these companies are already starting to make contacts and try to secure like R&D funds and also government contracts for at least development and for tests and for potential planning in the future with countries around the world, you know, Japan and China and all over throughout Europe and then in North America as well. And so these things are kind of aimed to at least replace cars for mid-length travel. You know, airplanes will still be there for long-distance travel and rockets for long-distance travel, but for middle-distance travel, the Hyperloops are going to, at least in theory, potentially supersede the need for vehicles for, you know, just imagine like, you know, like trucking routes and things like that around the country. That could be made obsolete. Long-distance travel. I mean, you could travel, I think, based on their estimates from Southern California, Los Angeles to San Francisco in like 30 minutes, which is better than air travel. And then if you could figure out how to sort of expand that to short-distance travel as well, then there could potentially be a way for cars to be replaced eventually. So maybe the libertarian superhero does have a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of educate me on what the sort of projections are for this. Is it going to be a privatized deal? Because I can't imagine how in the world that would work if not publicly funded and run.
Well, I mean, as it is right now, I believe, and again, people out there, especially my friend Kyle, who listens to the podcast, who's much more into this world than I am, he might know. I believe that Elon Musk presently does have the patent on this Hyperloop technology. So, because I know that SpaceX is one of the three big companies that is really developing this technology. But I don't know about what the long-term – it would probably be some hybrid of public and private investment, since that's at least what it's shaping up to be in the sort of preliminary R&D stages right now. That's why, you know, you have these companies that are actually making these government contracts or government contacts so that when the technology is safe and they can guarantee that the G-forces aren't going to crush the people inside the capsule and things like that, then they'll be able to kind of start rolling them out on a trial basis within these various countries. But yeah. Okay,
well, I'll say this. If Elon Musk kills the car, even though I'm not much of a fan of his, I will call him my libertarian superhero.
Okay.
If he kills the car.
Deal.
That will forgive all sins at that point.
Deal. By the way, the name of the company, I just looked it up. It's Hyperloop Transportation Technologies, just so that, you know, people don't get mad at me for misrepresenting their companies and their boyfriends' companies. I got to at least promote for my peeps, you know? So, but no, I feel you, man. We are too in love with the car. One of the things I love about being in Europe is that public transportation is just much more prevalent, for one, and it's much more convenient. You know, I mean, it's a little more expensive in Ireland than I would like, but in the UK, even though the prices are going up, because public transportation used to be free, which I think public transportation should be free, but
Yes.
but it's definitely cheaper than it is in Southern California, and it's way more convenient and way more efficient than it is there. I mean, fuck, if you don't have a car in Los Angeles or Orange County, it's not easy to get around. And I know because I've gone through a couple of different short stints in my life, either just coming back to visit for extended periods of time after living in the UK, or like in between, like with you when you get in a car accident or something like that. Or I went through one stage where I was in LA and I thought I could get by without having a car, so I sold my truck. Dude, a couple of months, you're like, I can't fucking get around. The metro system is awful. The bus system is sketchy as fuck. So, public transportation, Hyperloop, let's get that shit going. Libertarian superheroes, I love you. Just as long as you're down when the socialist revolution comes, you're down to release control over the means of production eventually. But for now, means to an end, I'm with you.
Just understand, y'all gonna get expropriated at some point. So just
That's right.
As long as you're cool with that, and you sign a waiver
right.
that says, when I get expropriated, I'm gonna be cool with it, then we're good.
Deal.
All right, so for our next segment, our main segment today, we are talking about the flat Earth. Why do people believe in this? What causes it? Is it a problem? Is it just funny and we should kind of let it go? Is there some deeper truth there? Which, of course, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably already know what we're going to say about that. There definitely is something deeper and more interesting about this phenomenon. But the context, why we're talking about this now, do you want to talk about how this came up? Or
Yeah, well, apparently over the last year or so, maybe 2 years or so, I've been hearing about all these celebrities coming out saying that they believe that the Earth is flat. Apparently, like B.O.B., the hip-hop artist, he was kind of saying he believes the Earth is flat. Tila Tequila, I mean, if ever there were a savant that we should listen to, it's Tila Tequila, who believes that the Earth is flat. So there are all these celebrities, or is she a celebrity? Pseudo-celebrities? Notorious people that are claiming that the Earth is flat. And so, you know, I did a little bit of research, and I was like, they don't really believe the Earth is flat, right? But then I found a bunch of YouTube videos that are scientific, with air quotes, that are actually presenting arguments as to why the Earth is flat. So, you know, it was a little bit there. And then last week, one of the greatest basketball players on the planet said this: "This is not even a conspiracy theory. The Earth is flat. The Earth is flat. It's right in front of our faces. I'm telling you, it's right in front of our faces. They lie to us." Kyrie Irving from the world champion Cleveland Cavaliers has come out saying that the Earth is flat, and he's been getting a lot of shit because of it. So
yeah, and in his credit, he's kind of laughing it all off. Like he's not being as serious as that quote sounded. I'm pretty sure he was like, you know, kind of chortling as he's saying these things. And he kind of walked it back a little bit later. No, I watched an interview with him the other day. It was All-Star Weekend in the NBA, and he was talking. He was obviously has reporters around him 24/7, and he was saying basically that, you know, he found out when, you know, he went to when he grew up and became an adult, that a lot of the things that he was told when he was young, obvious truths, authoritatively based truths, were wrong. And he's basically saying, why should I feel differently about this one? And a couple other NBA players came out during this weekend and said the same thing. Basically, hey, you know, who's to say? That's what we're told. We're told the world is differently than it looks, but I haven't seen it. Have you?
That's right. Draymond Green, I guess, came out and said, I don't know, but it could be.
Yeah. Which is kind of a brotherhood thing. I mean, they're defending their guy.
Of course.
I guess.
Of course. Hey, and look, I'll be honest, dude. I'm telling you right now, it could be. The Earth could be flat. It is possible. It is logically possible that the Earth is flat. Is that not true?
Yeah, I mean, also, I mean, just in the sense that we had no idea space was curved before Einstein. So, you know, what if it was? We find out later, actually, space is some weird way flat, and the way it looks round, it actually isn't. It's like a double fake out. It looks flat, but it's actually round, but it's actually flat.
It's so round that it's flat?
Some weird contortion of space-time actually means it looks round from space, but isn't.
Yeah, maybe it's some simulation. We live in a simulation, and all of this is just all fake. Everything that we believe, even our mathematical laws, are all just bullshit constructions of some weird algorithm because people are fucking with us.
Yeah, Elon Musk believes the binary values that determine our reality basically it means that it's one-dimensionally flat, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So anyway, that stuff aside, have you ever come across in your own experiences teaching a student who has questioned this, or even just anybody personally that's advocated for a flat Earth position?
Not flat Earth. I have had some other interesting conspiracy theories or fringe beliefs, but I've never encountered a flat Earth person. Have you?
Yes, several times.
Several
Students
times
in class. Yeah, I think 3 times it's happened.
3 times.
I believe so. Yeah. See, this is what's
Wow,
weird.
okay.
I feel like this is more prevalent than many people give it credit for, and I'm surprised you haven't come
Apparently.
across anybody who has. Maybe just you've been in Europe too long.
Yeah, and they're just drunk all the time
Everyone-
over here, so you know.
Yeah.
they
And
don't
everyone's
care.
just slovenly, dedicated to authoritative positions. All you
Or
socialists
everyone-
over there.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. Okay,
Just
so how
believe
does it
whatever
come
the
up?
man in a lab coat tells you. You know what Stanley Milgram said about believing a guy in a lab coat? Exactly. Sorry, I'm channeling my Kyrie Irving right now.
I know. So how does it come up? Are you talking about, because I mean you don't teach science, so does this come about because you're talking about presuppositions or conspiracy theories or ideology, or how does this come about?
It's always as a weird aside usually. Like it'll be we'll talk about the difference between a time when people may have believed in the geocentric model of the universe versus the heliocentric.
Mm-hmm.
And then the idea of the Earth orbiting the sun and being round in that process comes up, and then a student will push back on it. One of those 3 times was a student who honestly had never heard of it before. That
I've
surprised
never heard
me.
of what?
Had never been taught that the Earth was round. And he was kind of a sheltered student, so I kind of understood it. That he had clearly been, I think, homeschooled and from a very conservative position to the point where he just never heard a lot of stuff before. So he was genuinely inquisitive, like, are you serious? The Earth is round?
It's so weird.
Why would you?
That's a conservative position? Because I've been around some pretty conservative people.
No. I mean that obviously his parents had homeschooled him and not allowed him to have any resources other than what they had. given to him.
Okay.
Whatever that ended up being.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Now, can I just confession time real quick before we get into this? Can I just say something really embarrassing? This is really embarrassing. Okay. So, like, before I transferred to my 4-year university, because, you know, I was in high school and I was an actor and I was in a punk band, and I thought that I didn't really need school, and I was, you know, a B student. So I was like, whatever, school wasn't really my thing. And then when I graduated, I had no plans on going to college because I was just planning on being a rock star or a famous actor. And so that was the plan. So I was like, fuck it. So I didn't really care. So my grades were not that great. So when I decided to go back to school when I was 21, almost 22, I had to go to junior college for 2 years just so I could get the grades. And also because it's a little bit less expensive, get the grades so that I could transfer. And that's what I ended up doing. And so I did that. And it was after my conversion to Christianity. So I was balls deep in like the Institute for Creation Research and Answers in Genesis and the Discovery Institute and Intelligent Design and stuff. And so I was like eating that stuff up, right? And I was in an astronomy class and we had to give a report or a presentation. And I gave a presentation on evidential arguments for a young Earth in my astronomy class. And I remember the most forceful argument, in my opinion at the time, was the recession of the moon, because apparently the moon is receding from the Earth about 1.5 inches or 2 inches every single year. And so the argument was, well, yeah, but then if you calculate that backwards in time, then like 500,000 years ago or something like that, then the Earth and the moon would have been touching, so that the Earth can't nearly be, you know, billions of years old and can only be a couple thousand years old or something like that. So, with that said, I was an adult man. I was 22 years old. And I went in strongly and boldly defending the faith with evidence that I thought would somehow, you know, represent my faith and that I was being faithful. So I totally sympathize, I empathize with people that are going to hold to some sort of fringe belief on something. Totally, because I get it.
No, I think that's actually a pretty nice little segue into getting into the deeper aspects of this, because really what was driving you there, and if you're into like, what's the guy, Philip Johnson, who wrote the Darwin on Trial book, which I know for me was a huge influence early on in that whole trying to figure out how science, the academy, and Christianity kind of mesh together.
Right.
There's a strong conspiratorial element to it. Very strong. Like,
Yes.
the scientific community is bent towards philosophical naturalism, and they will not budge on that non-scientific ideological position that only physical, natural things can exist and be thought of as causes or determined to be causes of anything in a scientific sense. And they push really hard on that stuff. And the rest of the arguments, the recession of the moon, the stuff about the flood and all that jazz, that's all just, really, it's peripheral. They just make that stuff up to satisfy people
It's ad hoc.
churches who want to listen to
Absolutely,
it.
it's
Yeah,
ad hoc.
totally
It's
ad
like
hoc.
it's if you watch the debate with Bill Nye versus Ken Ham, it's almost a waste of time for Bill Nye, because clearly you could say anything you want, but Ken Ham, ultimately his argument comes back to a defense of his evangelical faith.
Yeah, it really comes, and Ken Ham's even more kind of crazy than that, because he just basically is like, just look at the Bible, and that's your answer.
Exactly.
Which couldn't be a more of a vicious circle. But at least with the slightly more educated side of that apologetics debate, it's this philosophical naturalism idea that really gets down to. It's a difference of sort of how can you do science in the first place? And obviously, we both think that stuff is bunk now, and those criticisms of philosophical naturalism in science are, don't really work. But I at least understand there's some thought behind it that I can kind of respect, and that I think you can argue that position. And I think a lot of the problem is the scientists go at this trying to give evidence, this evidentiary position, when that's not where the debate's being had for these, people in the debates. It really comes down to these ideological positions, and they don't really understand that for some reason, or are not willing to discuss that.
Right.
But anyway, yeah, I think this flat Earth stuff, and it's more prevalent than I think almost anyone's willing to admit, really, again, doesn't come down to evidence. Like, I was talking in class the other day about flat Earth for some reason, and I don't remember the context, but, I just kind of pointed out the most obvious evidence that the Earth isn't flat is just walk outside, look at the horizon line. If a car is approaching or, going away from you, then you'll see the bottom of it disappear or appear, or the top of it, if they're coming towards you, appear first. Which means the Earth is curved, because if that's not the case, then it would all come out at once. And you can just watch videos of that happening on the internet if you want to as well. Like, it's couldn't be more obvious the Earth is curved.
But wouldn't that require a perfectly flat surface? Because our surface is mountainous. So if they're going up a mountain or down a mountain, or they're coming up over a hill, then that kind of creates a different sort of optical reference point. No?
Okay, of course. But you can measure incline and decline. And so if you measure that and there isn't an incline or decline, and yet still things on the horizon line act that way, then there's a long curve, right?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that's, again, the point is evidence doesn't matter. You can tell that to somebody if they're dedicated to this flat Earth position. That's not going to sway them. Not just because they're so ideologically rigid they won't change their mind. That's too simplified of a hypothesis, I think. It really comes down to this idea of skepticism. They're dedicated to, like the creationists are, with philosophical naturalism being a problem, some ideological position against authoritative narratives. Like, when someone who's in a lab coat, or someone who's an authority figure, a teacher, or someone on TV, whatever, says, this is common sense, this is just the case, especially when that common sense flies in the face of what you see every day, you recoil against that if you have this fixed ideological position. And people like, basketball players, celebrities, whoever it might be, now I don't have any research on this, but also we see this happens a lot more with minorities than not. That's probably a part of it too, is that, especially for celebrities, when you grow up black in America, you're figure out pretty early on that the dominant common sense narratives you're told oftentimes are bullshit. And so you take that with you, right?
And so basically you're suggesting that there's almost a dispositional skepticism to any sort of authoritarian declaration. And whether or not it manifests itself through, a rejection of scientific facts or political facts or whatever, the point is that there's that seed, that kind of dispositional seed that can manifest itself if it latches onto a sort of particular bit of evidence or a particular matrix or network of ideas.
Yeah, exactly. It's very much dispositional. Which, I mean, my contrarian viewpoint is that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very good impulse for people to have. To automatically be skeptical of claims that the world is not as it appears, or even that it is as it appears. Should be skeptical of both of those. And any attempt to say, oh, well, you're stupid, or, oh, but don't you know science, or have you seen pictures, or whatever, those are obviously not good sort of retorts or replies to that dispositional skepticism.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. If you say to someone, you're a fucking idiot, obviously it's settled the earth is round, duh. As soon as you say that, the trap doors on the ears close, the mind shuts down, and they automatically kind of go back into that safety net, that dispositional habit of distancing themselves from that.
Yeah, I mean, as a teacher, if a student says, oh, I think that's not the case, you like perk up. You're like, okay, great. Let's get into it, right? Let's discuss. Right. Let's figure out why we think that. What would be the possible evidences that could sway us in a different way. Look at it as objectively as possible, even if it's an obvious thing like the earth is round. Those are all great things. Those are opportunities to not just teach, but to teach how to learn, how to think in the first place, which is great, regardless of the conclusion you come to. So I feel like, it's good to have this skeptical impulse towards things. And these retorts of, you're an idiot, you're stupid, or just accept science. I think the commissioner of the NBA went to Duke, same as Kyrie Irving did. And he made a funny remark this weekend that was, Kyrie and I went to the same college, but I think we took different classes. Which was funny. But that wasn't a racial thing about Kyrie not going to class, by the way, because Kyrie's a really smart guy. And Duke doesn't do that. They make their basketball players go to class.
Oh, especially Coach K. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. They're big on that. But it was a mark basically saying you don't listen to authority and I do. Which it was meant as a joke, so it's not meant to be taken that seriously. But that's kind of what it means, right?
Yeah. Do you think that impulse, that skeptical dispositional impulse is something, because it exists in various different paradigms. So for Kyrie, it has to do, whether or not he's serious. Let's just assume that he's serious, right? Or someone who believes in a flat earth and that they kind of hunker down on that idea because they're skeptical of an external authority imposing views upon them. So it can exist in scientific frameworks or paradigms, but it can also exist, for example, in a religious or political context. So somebody, for example, let's say in a very authoritarian society, like I want to say North Korea, but I don't want to pick on the North Koreans. I want to go with someone who I do want to pick on. The fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, what was that guy's name? Jeffries or whatever? So you have the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints, and they kind of just believe what they believe because of a certain sort of authoritarian impulse that's been imposed upon them. But now if there's a counterfactual thing that comes to them that says, no, the Book of Mormon is not authoritatively from God, they also have a skepticism as well. So what's the difference in that? Like, what is the conditional difference? Or do you think that even within that, there's still a sort of indication that, okay, this person at least has something that would allow them to, I don't know, spark that skeptical impulse to life towards some other viewpoint? Does that make sense?
What do you mean they still have a skeptical impulse in the fundamentalist LDS movement when someone comes with some contrary evidence?
Well, what I'm wondering is if somebody kind of retreats into, if they retreat from the opposing viewpoint because they're like, well, you're just obviously a fucking moron. Joseph Smith was a criminal. We know that, obviously. And then they kind of just go, I don't like that. I don't trust you. That doesn't sound right. Maybe the fundamental Latter-day Saint one is actually a really bad example because maybe they're just so fucking brainwashed. But I don't know. Do you see what I'm trying to get at? I'm wondering.
More apologetics than skepticism, though, because they're coming at it from a point of defending assumed truths rather than skeptically searching for what can be disproven or countered.
Well, then what's the difference between that and someone? What's the difference between that and someone like a Kyrie Irving? Because isn't he apologetically defending what he believes? But his defense is something that's based on just a different set of conditions, right? He's defending his experience as, whoever he is and however he's grown up and why ever he has mistrusted those other authorities, but he's still clinging to something. I don't think it's this free disposition of skepticism that has no authoritarian or ideological structuration of its own, right?
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Now, this is a good segue to, I think, the main thing I wanted to at least bring up, my kind of theory on this thing, or my disposition myself towards this thing. I think skepticism is a great impulse, but naked of any context, or like as a foundational impulse or virtue, it's nothing. Like, it's just kind of aimless and wandering. And so, right. I think that the example you're getting of like a conservative kind of skepticism, like I'm skeptical of anything that doesn't conform to my already pre-established beliefs. Science can sometimes have that too. I mean, science is supposed to be about continually disconfirming hypotheses and developing those into theories over long periods of time, right? Whereas sometimes science can get a little rigid and be like, we're not going to change ever. And that's not helpful to the progress of science, right? That can be kind of a conservative skepticism in certain ways.
Right.
Skepticism, when it's understood in a narrative of the development and exercise of political power, however, though, can be virtuous, I do think. In the sense of you're looking at the skepticism not through I refuse to believe anything an authority tells me, but asking the question, what does the authority have to gain by telling this to me? Right. What is the structure of power in play between the speaker, the authoritative speaker, and the listener or the student? When you couch it in that frame, then all of a sudden I think that brings a lot more to light. It really just comes from this understanding that I think we both take to everything, which is politics is always about the exercise of power.
Right.
And everything is politics. So that means everything by transitive property is about the exercise of power. And so in that sense, when someone says, oh, this is the case, right? We're going to use sort of phrenology to say that's the white race is superior to everybody else. Then you look at that and you go, okay, wait a minute. I'm skeptical because I see clear exercise of power being used by authoritative people in a culture and society. That makes me skeptical. So now I'm going to use that impulse to look into the actual evidence and see if that's true.
Right.
That's a great way to use a skeptical impulse.
Then what I would wonder is, where does that skeptical impulse, from where does it emerge? Because if you're skeptical of some external power structure, it doesn't just derive in a vacuum. That skeptical impulse itself is a manifestation of some sort of emergent power that is impelling you forward, right? And that's what I think I was trying to get at, is that the skeptical impulse is itself a construct of various forces. And those forces exist under different conditions. They can exist within the community of the fundamentalist Latter-day Saints. It can exist under an authoritarian regime in North Korea, or it can exist as a minority that is skeptical of what the white power structure deems as sort of, just common sense information. So it's always about the origins of that skeptical impulse that is interesting. And what I wonder is, in its expression, in its manifestation, regardless of the context, is the expression of skepticism an indication of life that could be stimulated regardless of how suppressed the rest of the possibility of that skepticism to create a sort of beneficial thought, regardless of how suppressed it is there still, is Is there an indication that maybe just the expression of skepticism itself, regardless of context, that there's something there, and that something could just simply be life or imagination or thinking, and that as long as we recognize that there is that spark, that means that there is hope for anybody to kind of engage within this network of power relations to kind of develop better thoughts, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think my own personal impulse, you can tell me if you disagree here, would be that kind of positive exercise of power or whatever it might be is probably better constructed through the critical analysis of dominant power structure, so that in the actual sort of criticism, you figure out what it is that the current structures of power are sort of suppressing in yourself and in society at large. So, like, I'm thinking there's a common sense notion in the West today, which is that markets are always more efficient and always better for sort of
resource allocation.
Yeah, than sort of central planning or planning of any sort in general. Right. And whenever that's just common sense. Everyone understands that. You don't even have to present reasons for it. And if someone asks you for reasons, you go to historical examples and you say, look at the 5-year plans of the Soviet Union and how terrible that was, and compare that to what American markets have done with food, for instance. And you see obvious examples of sort of empirical evidence that this is the case. But I mean, there's a lot of cherry picking going on there.
Right.
Plus, I don't know anybody who argues that the 5-year plans were like a rousing success. No one who advocates for central planning goes to that as their evidence. They present new ways of using data analysis and stuff like that to figure out how central planning might succeed in the future in ways that markets currently fail. So it's like they're talking about two very different things, right?
Right.
When you look at that common sense notion of markets over planning, you kind of can be skeptical and say, well, who really has to gain from this idea? Probably the people who gain from massive inequality created by the way certain markets work.
Right.
And that sort of critical analysis leads you into the production of a better future or that better impulse. Well, then what could we do if this common sense notion wasn't true? Maybe we could have a fair and more equal and more just society with better resource allocation.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's John Kenneth Galbraith. That's one of the things he talks about in his book, The Affluent Society. He talks about how under the present capitalist paradigm, it's production that is the sort of transcendental condition that dictates the market logic. So market logics are considered rational in the economic sense because they can best allocate resources from the perspective of stimulating and advancing production. But if we didn't use production as the paradigm by which we measured economic or socioeconomic value or success, then there would be other ways to think about what economy means, what society means, what flourishing means, and what a proper allocation of resources also means within that different paradigm. So, 100%. I follow you.
Yeah, and just to circle back around, I feel like this is not what's happening in the popular flat earth stuff, right? With Kyrie and B.O.B. and others. This is actually, I think, a different kind of constructed positive flow of skepticism. This comes much more from the American radical individualistic mistrust of authority, right? Like, look at all of our TV heroes and movie heroes and superheroes. Almost all of them are like anti-establishment, Lone Ranger, man with no name types, right? They don't submit themselves to any authority. They're all by themselves. Every authority is just somebody trying to use power to get their own. The true moral hero is the anti-hero who refuses that. And this comes from all sides of the political spectrum, right? Jack Bauer is that way, and he's like the conservative torturing superhero, right? Right. He never, every authority is against him. Everything wants to put red tape on him, whether conservative or liberal. And he's just the rogue renegade who wants to save, poor children's lives or whatever.
That's right.
I'm watching that new Tom Hardy show right now, Taboo. And it's like this on steroids because the East India Company is just like murdering people, and the British government's full of like fat sociopaths, and Tom Hardy's just this badass that can recite African tribal languages and like, doesn't submit himself to anybody, and he's the moral hero for doing that. So if you're just rejecting authority is considered a virtue in itself.
Yeah, we do this with all of our historical figures. I mean, when you look at the civil rights movement, we don't look at it as a massive collective struggle that took place over decades in various contexts where all of these individual nodes served as components within this big network that itself tore down a certain hierarchical system. We look at, it's Martin Luther King, he's the guy that did it. And that's not to in any way denigrate the contributions of Martin Luther King. He's a big, huge node in that network. But nevertheless, we tend to just err to the side of individualization, where we look at these massive things. Like, what was that guy's name? William Wilberforce? Is that the guy that was like the British anti-slave trade abolitionist? Yeah, was that his name, William Wilberforce?
Yeah.
There was that movie that came out a few years ago that made it seem like he was like the guy, right?
God's like humble Moses servant sent to save.
Yeah, he was the guy that tore down the British slave trade. And obviously that was a very sort of Western liberal interpretation of a much more complex network of circumstances. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. And
it just means that I guess you can view MLK as an anti-establishment figure, or as a guy who advocated for socialist policies, right? As an purely anti-big government figure. Like that's it's kind of crazy.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, and that's, to be honest, I mean, that's what they're doing with Trump, right? That's what the alt-right in some of its factions, that's why they view Trump as being this sort of savior, because that's what he is. He is this guy that is not going to just simply accept what the authoritarians on the left say about, sort of liberal snowflake political correct ideas. And then neither is he the guy on the right that's just simply going to perpetuate the Republican establishment's ideas, that they have been perpetuating for whatever reason. So that's what you kind of get within the alt-right movement too, is that there's this seeking to reclaim freedom or liberty from the authoritarian oppressors, or the authoritarian systems of oppression.
We almost went the entire episode without naming him. But,
you know what? I almost qualified and said I'm going to bring him up in this episode, even though we could go. But I just felt like it's there, dude. It's there. He is the transcendental condition by which all philosophical and political conversations take place.
I know, right? No, but I think that you're absolutely right to point that out, and I was going to bring it up anyway if you hadn't. So good on you.
Okay.
For taking that bullet for me. But no, yeah, the sense that you can view Trump as an anti-establishment figure just shows the dearth of what you consider an establishment, or the dearth of analysis of what's considered an establishment, right? It's just government. Whereas if you understood this good skeptical impulse to be one where you're skeptical within a narrative of the development exercise of political power, then it'd be very clear that Donald Trump is just as much part of the establishment, meaning political power establishment, in the country as any senator or establishment figure like Clinton was. He's just on the different part of that spectrum, right? He's on the side of not big government necessarily, but on the side of, sort of corporate excess and corporate control and capturing of the regulation process and government in general. So, yeah, that just comes from a very narrow understanding of what this establishment could be. Whereas, we have an opportunity, though, I think, in that if you just respond to this stuff by saying, oh, you're an idiot, or you don't understand things, or Trump's a horrible person and you're horrible for supporting him, all those things could be true. They don't help. It's the same as telling a flat earther you're an idiot for believing that. Maybe they are, but that doesn't necessarily help make things better or improve their knowledge. Instead, let's try and build out these narratives to understanding why Clinton may be a huge problem when it comes to this exercise of power, and we should be skeptical of anything she says or promotes. And so is Trump, and so is everybody who ends up in positions of power in society. So we should be skeptical of them for these reasons, which in the process of that can help us build a constructive, better vision for what society could look like.
Yeah.
We don't do that.
No, we don't do that. We like to just tell people they're fucking morons. So it's interesting. I get into a lot of discussions with Christians, or I engage with, certain people that self-align with the alt-right. And they are so, or even like, libertarian Austrian economist types that I engage with and I chat with. They're so accustomed to people on the left demonizing and calling them morons that I have to spend a lot of times the first 5 or 10 minutes saying, whoa, hold on. I'm not saying you're a fucking idiot. I didn't say that. And they're like, well, but everyone on the left says this. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Okay, maybe. Okay, I said, but let's not engage at that level. They're so used to having to attack, defend, because that's the general platform at which public discourse takes place, that it makes it really difficult to actually try to scrape beneath and have any sort of meaningful dialogue. So it is kind of interesting, and I do think that, I don't know, that it does a disservice to the development of ideas and the development of stimulating productive power relations if you just engage at that level of violent communication.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that the level of public discourse is just trended this way. And I guess in some sense it maybe always has been to a certain extent, but it seems like we're spending so much more of our energy talking to people we don't know that it's so much easier to just be virulent in the whole thing and venomous. But I don't want to get into this whole like social media is evil campaign again. We've done that enough on the podcast.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Well, all I'm taking from this conversation is that it is virtuous and it is wise to believe that the earth is flat, because that means you have a skeptical disposition towards external authoritarian power structures. So thanks, Troy. The earth is flat.
If that's what you got, then you are a fucking idiot. Oh, wait, I shouldn't say that. You have a narrow understanding of the breadth of which considered an establishment, friend.
Yeah, you said something a few weeks ago when we were talking about libertarianism, where I don't remember exactly how you framed it, but in that context, it's almost everything is establishment, and there are always institutions, and because of that, there are always dominating power structures that are imposing ideas, and it isn't about the complete sort of rejection of all hierarchy and all institution. Is, I think, a utopia. And I don't mean that in a positive sense. I mean that in a sense where I think it's a sort of illusion, utopian anarchism that I don't think will ever exist. So it's about the construction of better institutions, and then the disruption of those institutions and the recreation of them to form new ones, and the disruption of them. Because what you have is this constant creation, disruption of the unbounded flows of life that are also encapsulated by consciousness and system building. And so it's creation, destruction with regards to these things. So, I don't know. Does that make sense? It's not about... That's not like a vindication of authoritarianism, but it's a sort of recognition that you can't escape entirely system building or institutions.
That's just politics, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
And you put that flowery Deleuzian language on it, and it sounds amazing.
That's right, brother. That's it's called poetry. It's called aesthetics.
Yeah, Sticky Leaf segment, for those not in the know, is where one of us talks about whatever it is that's bringing us meaning and satisfaction in a world devoid of such. So, Austin, what do you have for us this week?
I think I got a pretty quick one this week. So this weekend, I had the opportunity to go to a castle in the town, I guess, city, I guess it's a city, of Trim in Ireland, in County Meath. And this castle is an old Norman castle that was built for and by Hugh de Lacy, who was one of the feudal lords after the Norman invasion here in Ireland. And it was fucking amazing, dude. This castle was so sick. The construction started in, I believe, 1171, so it's 12th century, and then it was completed in like the 13th, 14th centuries. You know, they obviously do reconstructions on it after, you know, they develop new technologies and invasions happen, and so they have to rebuild it and shit like that. But it was amazing to wander around this building that was like 1,000 fucking years old. A couple weeks ago, I was in Waterford, Ireland, which is the oldest city in Ireland that was a Viking establishment, and there was a structure there that was built in like the 1000s. The city itself was founded by the Vikings in 914, so again, it's a city that's 1,000 years old, and there are structures that are still standing from the early settlement of it by the Vikings. And then, of course, you have the Norman invasion that comes in. And so we talked a little bit about it a few weeks ago, where it's like the Gaelic Norms and the Gaels and then the Normans and then the Gaelic Vikings and then the Viking Norms. And they're all just kind of mixing each other up and all this other shit. And then the Brits come, and then there's just weird, you know, hundreds of years of colonization and shit, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Okay. The point is, do you remember when we were at our undergrad institution, and people would go and study in Jerusalem for a semester, and they would come back and they would be like, guys, you have to do it. It just makes the Bible come to life. Do you remember? Do you remember that?
That was everyone was forced to say. It felt like they were like robotically repeating it.
Okay, I'm going to say something. I feel like traveling around in Ireland and walking in these castles and shit, it is making history come to life. And it is fucking cool, man. So I just want to say that mytho-histories coming to life is rad. I am glad that I am able to experience certain mythological, historical reenactments in my own imagination as I understand the very little bits of European history that I understand and the bits that I can continue to gather. It's just been fucking awesome. So that's what I would say. It's fucking amazing. If you guys get a chance, if you're listening out there, to come to Ireland, go to Wales, go to the UK, go elsewhere in Europe, get the fuck out of Southern California or Seattle or wherever you are. If you're in Europe, get on a Ryanair jet and fly over somewhere. You can get a ticket for like 30 quid. It is cake. Just enjoy it, because it's fucking cool, man. It is really cool to just... You know, I'm kind of a weird, like, hippie sometimes, and so I feel like when I'm standing in these great halls where Hugh DeLacy and his family, I feel like I'm engaging with some residual spiritual connection with these historical figures. I was walking up the ramp to this castle, and I was thinking, how many people fucking died trying to storm this castle? And I, like, touched a rock, and I was like, how many people walked past this stone over the 1,000 years, you know? Like, yeah, I just think it's beautiful, man. So history's cool. History coming to life is cool. Mythology is cool. And, yeah, go view some castles because they're fucking rad.
You know, it was a similar kind of observation that I made when I was in Scotland, was you walk around and you see lots of graveyards. Like, every block has, like, a giant graveyard, it feels like. And one day I just realized, dude, like, monotheists have been dying here for over 1,000 years.
Yeah.
So, and you grew up in Los Angeles, you know, monotheists have been dying here for like 100 years. And so, it's a pretty stark difference in terms of the number of dead people they have to put somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really does give
crazy.
you 100%. It's so crazy. And it sort of does change the religious paradigm as well. Because you start to, especially I was walking and I was talking with Kira about this as we were walking out of the castle, and I said to her, I was like, just imagine how dire and dark life was back then. You know, 1170, 1180, you're probably only living to be 45 or 50 years old anyway, and that's if you're healthy. You make it out of your mid-20s, that's considered a decent life. Health care was non-existent. Hygiene was, dude... They used to literally use their shit and their excrement and the ammonia that came from it to sterilize their clothes. So they had these systems where it was these big chutes where all the excrement would be contained. And there was a dude whose job it was, the worst job, in the history of medieval Europe, by the way. His job was to go down there and stir up the excrement so that it would release the ammonia, and then they had these canals or these tunnels, or these, I guess, what would you call them, like almost like chimneys that would lead up to people's rooms where they would hang their linens and things like that, and they would get sanitized because the ammonia released would kill germs and things like that. Like, that's gross, man. I'm so glad we have modern-day plumbing and modern-day washing machines and soap. But just think about how dark and how dingy and how gross life was. Of course you were going to believe in the afterlife. Of course Christianity was going to have its hold over you, because life sucked. And so of course they could say, yeah, be a peasant and build my fucking castle, but it's okay because you're going to get a reward in the afterlife. Obviously you're going to embrace that.
Dude, does that give new meaning? Or is that the history behind the phrase stirring up shit?
I wonder, man. I wonder.
Alright, so for our next segment, our bullshitting segment, we're talking about something that really means nothing, is frivolous, or we know nothing about. So today, we're recording on President's Day in America. I'm off work because of President's Day. So I thought maybe we'll talk about who our favorite historical president is. And for some bullshitty reason. Not like, who do you most ideologically align with, or something like that. That's stupid. Let's talk about something ridiculous, like who's just your favorite president from when you were growing up and you had to hear all the ridiculous apocryphal stories about presidents. Who's like your guy?
Or maybe we just make something up completely. Can I pick two?
Yeah, of course. No rules here.
All right, so I have one for one reason, and I have another for a completely ridiculous reason. They're both stupid, but I'm going to say John F. Kennedy because the guy was a pimp, and he knew how to throw that shit down.
You would be JFK if you were a president, I feel like. That makes sense to me.
Apparently, some people believe that he was actually assassinated by intelligence agencies because he was fucking about so much. He was fucking like Russian spies and all these other random ambassadors. Then they were like, this fool can't be trusted because he's going to release secrets to the country. So that's the intelligence agencies were the ones that were like, we got to get rid of him. Now, I had heard that maybe it was an inside job, but I had never heard it was because the guy couldn't control where he threw his dick, which is very interesting. Have you heard that before?
I've never heard that. Why wouldn't they just like substitute it and like just send supermodels at him like every weekend when he's out?
Dude, that's not as exciting. Can you imagine? Dude, you want to bang some Cold War girls. What are you talking about?
You want to bang Angela Merkel? What the fuck?
She's Western Germany, bro. He was all about those Eastern German steroided ambassador chicks, man.
I guess, man. I just don't know what it's like to be a pimp, so I don't get that impulse.
JFK, the biggest pimp in the history of American... Well, besides Wilt Chamberlain. Wilt Chamberlain and JFK. No, okay. Then I'm going to have to go with the one that's even more ridiculous. And this is a little-known story that they made a movie about, but not many people saw the movie. Actually, I mean, it did make good money, but I don't think people realize that it's based on historical fact. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln was a vampire hunter?
I've heard about this in school.
Yes.
It was mentioned briefly in a footnote, I think.
Abraham Lincoln actually was a vampire hunter, and there's a documentary film made about this called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. You should check it out. As far as I understand, it's historically accurate. That's why I love me some Abraham Lincoln, because I have seen footage. Apparently they have found footage from the 1800s of Abraham Lincoln wielding an axe chopping off vampire heads. So that impresses me. Abraham Lincoln and JFK, the pimp and the vampire hunter. Title of my first book.
And even with the obviously true and not apocryphal vampire hunter stories for Abraham Lincoln, you know who was still even more of a badass as president in reality? Teddy fucking Roosevelt.
Yeah. Fucking cowboy.
He was more of a badass in reality than fake joke satirical movies about presidents. Yeah. Like that's an accomplishment. So Teddy Roosevelt's my number one. I loved that bastard in high school, reading about him. He was my guy. I mean, obviously politically I wouldn't align with him very much today in a lot of ways. But just, I mean, he's everything John McCain says that he is.
Oh, he's a maverick. He's a cowboy.
He's all that shit. Literal maverick. And obviously that didn't always work out for him all that well. Yeah. But like I can appreciate if you've had Teddy Roosevelt as your president, you would at least know this bro is just gonna do and say what the fuck he wants, and I honestly believe he's not beholden to anybody else.
Did you have to do a report on him?
Yeah, I think I did at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, one, Teddy Roosevelt. I want more presidents that are just obvious badasses. You know, even if they're gonna do horrible shit, at least I can like appreciate them as a figure, public figure. But also, my other one was probably one that's a little out of left field. Calvin Coolidge. You know the classic stories about Calvin Coolidge just never said shit ever?
He never said anything?
Cool Cal, wasn't that his nickname? Something like that?
Yeah, Cool Cal.
I think the story was just, he just never spoke. Like, he just sat there and listened all the time. And
Really?
everyone thought, like, what the hell is this guy thinking? He just never talks. I mean, he's not supposed to be a very good president, right, I guess, according to history. I don't know exactly. But I feel like we could use more of that. I would love to have a president who's just, like, chilling a lot. You know, just soaking it all in, listening, making some decisions, you know, doing whatever. But then doesn't have to feel like they have to speak on every fucking issue. We already have a president who's literally watching InfoWars and then talking about the main story at a rally, like that night, instead of, I don't know, listening to like intelligence reports or whatever. We already have that. Like, he has to opine on every fucking thing on Twitter, on TV, whatever. Like, let's just get a president who's just kind of like relaxed and chill. He doesn't have to freak out all the fucking time. I wonder how much of our national panic is just caused by his cocaine-addled behavior.
100%.
You know? Like, it has a worrisome quality to it.
Yeah, there's this frenetic pace that he is establishing that everyone is... That's why it's very reactionary. I think we talked about this last week, right? Yeah, where we were talking about reactionary resistance. There's this chaotic cadence and disposition that Trump expresses, and then because of that, everybody else is chaotic and frenetic in response to it. And it's, he's saying this, and it can't be that, and it's this, and yeah, man, if you just had silent strength and then a steely gaze, you'd have Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, but then with him, that jawline's always making you worried that he's like fucking your girl on the side. So you're anxious for other reasons.
Have you seen those memes sorry, go ahead.
No, the PM Steal Your Girl ones with the
yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty great. Yeah, and, the way he avoided the Trump handshake pull thing was pretty awesome. I was digging that.
Yeah,
I can't believe no one's like done anything about that. Like this stupid, ridiculous alpha male behavior with the handshakes. Like, how hard? He's not that strong a dude. Like, no. he's kind of like a fat ass. Just like somebody's got to just pull him back. Like, why not? I want
to see someone just go in for like a casual bro 5. You know, where you don't shake, but where you kind of just go. What's it called? Where it's like over the top, where you like smack it and then you bring him in. I want to see someone do that and then just like put his hand up on his head and like mess up his hair a little bit and then push back and be like, "All right, baby," and then smack him on the butt as he walks away. Like, come on, that'd be so demeaning.
Somebody assert some dominance here. Come on.
Yeah. Okay, now who is so obviously those are like the counterintuitive choices for president. And I was of course being in tongue in cheek. But who do you think outside of Teddy and Cool Cal, who's a good president? In of course the context in the context of, you know, empire. Who's the good president?
Best president in American history, undoubtedly, James Garfield.
Okay.
Wasn't he president for like 6 days or something? Or was that a different one?
Did he die? Did he get sick and die?
No, that was a different one, right? That got sick like 6 days later, and I forget who that was. McKinley or somebody? I don't remember. But Garfield got assassinated, didn't he? I think just like a few months later. The dude who died 6 days after taking office or whatever it was that's pretty awesome. He did the least damage via American imperialism of anybody else, probably. So I'll give it to him.
James Garfield was in office from March 4th to September 19th.
He lasted, 6 months.
Gosh, man. Why? What the hell? Who shot that fucker? Bummer, dude. Charles J. Guiteau. Who was the guy that got stuck in a bathtub? Was that Taft?
Yeah, I think so, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's my favorite. I like Taft. Yeah, he got stuck in a bathtub. Whatever. Ugh. All right. Well, cool. Well,
Who's
presidents.
yours?
Awesome.
Who's the best in terms of empire?
The best in terms of empire? I mean, I'm going to go with Thomas Jefferson because he was down with bloody revolution like every 20 years, you know?
And that really worked out.
Yeah, but it's the impulse. It's the skeptical, dispositional impulse that I like, Troy.
Are you sure Jefferson wouldn't have been down for bloody revolution against Reconstruction in the South?
Well, you know, he did think that black girls were hot, so maybe he would have, under different historical circumstances, come over to see the light, you know?
Yeah, so did Donald Sterling.
Yeah, that's a good point. Donald Sterling. Fuck that guy. What is I haven't heard that name in a long time. Everyone just Google Donald Sterling. Oh, God. Whatever happened to him? Is he still alive?
He disappeared with his money, as any smart
Yeah.
person would do after what happened to him.
For people who don't know, he's the former owner of the Clippers, and he was a disgrace.
He was fired by his entire industry
Yeah, he was.
for being a racist disgrace.
All right. Michael.
That's enough bullshitting, yeah.
Yeah, Michael, what's going on this week in hip-hop?
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Michael Burns with This Week in Hip Hop on the Owls at Dawn podcast. Hope everyone is doing well. Now, I think a few weeks ago, I don't know if anyone was judging me, but I feel like you might have judged me for some of the episodes where I was talking about some older records or some singles that had just came out that I wasn't super hype about, but I told you a lot of music was on the way, and goddamn it, the floodgates are open. A bunch of new stuff out this week and more things on the horizon, so we'll see how much I can cram in. First thing, I'll talk about this real quickly. Future put out a new record. It's called Future. It sounds like Future being Future. Intellectually and with my head, I don't like so many things about Future. With my heart or my soul or something, I kind of enjoy it. There's some fun things about the project. There's some really incredible lines, and by incredible, I don't mean lyrically dexterous and intellectually engaging. I just mean he says like some crazy shit in cool ways. The production is about what you would expect. It's a fun project, and it has some skits on it. It's been a while since we had skits in hip-hop, but you know, if you're fucking around, partying, driving, it's a fun album. You should maybe listen to it. But there's a few things I want to spend a little more time in detail talking about this week. First one, I've been excited about this for a while. It was announced and came out very quickly. Rock Marciano, probably one of the top 5 rappers operating out of New York. I think he's a Long Island guy. Record is called Rosebud's Revenge. First full length since the Pimpire Strikes Back they put out a few years ago. I mean, you're not going to be surprised to hear this if you're familiar with Rock Marcy's music. Real strong. Minimal features. You got his kind of in-house guys, Knowledge the Pirate, and Ka are on there. Production is mostly Rock Marciano himself, but we do have Knowledge, and that's Knowledge with an X, our LA friend, and Don C. And I think one of the most notable things about this project is that Rock Marciano has really found his own sound as a producer and crafted something really special. And not that he hasn't already had a very clear aesthetic and sound, very minimalist, very dusty, involving a lot of minimalist drum loops and such. But I think he's like clarified that sound even more on this project, and it really comes through. Lyrically, he's good as ever, and he has a style that really does stand out in the contemporary scene. Record's pretty long, but it's good. I think, gun to my head, I think I prefer his last album, The Pimpire Strikes Back. But in fairness, I've only had a chance to listen to this a couple times, so I might change my mind. The 2 songs after my first couple listens that really stood out were Marksman and Pray For Me. Pray For Me in particular had my favorite production on the album. But either way, I'll be shocked if this is not a record that we are talking about at the end of the year. Once again, that's Rosebud's Revenge, Rock Marciano. another project that came out, and one that I didn't expect to hear because I'd never heard of this dude before, but a Brooklyn MC named Saga, S-A-G-A, put out a project called Molotov. And the reason I heard about this project is because the whole thing is produced by someone that has been mentioned on this podcast maybe even too many times, Thelonious Martin out of Chicago, one of the best producers doing it. But man, it's a cool project. It's out on SoundCloud. I think it's free to listen to. I'm sure you can find a way to buy it if you want to throw dudes some money. But it's a really good project. It's strong. It has really good production. The Saga guy has a good voice. Lyrically pretty strong. There's features from Freddie Gibbs, Fashawn, Big Pooh. In particular, the Gibbs track, Karma, is really strong. Thelonious Martin and Gibbs have done some songs together before. Two Midwestern guys. I think their chemistry works really well. And I definitely think, and the Saga guy is really, really legit. I need to go back and listen to his other music. Gibbs definitely steals the show on Karma with his verse. And the verse actually references his detention in Europe last summer and some of the legal shit he went through. But really good song. The Big Pooh verse is really strong as well. And this one, man, no risk. It's out there. It's free. Listen to it. Enjoy it. If you like it, find a way to throw Saga and Thelonious Martin some money. But Molotov, I would definitely check that out. It was a fun discovery this week. Now, the album that I am most excited, sorry about that, to talk to you about this week, John Wayne. I've been talking about all the singles that have come out. It dropped this week. Rap Album 2. It is a super fucking strong project. I know it's only the end of February, although we're almost 25% of the way through 2017. But man, that's not true, by the way. I did my math wrong. We're only 2 months in. Fuck me. But either way, it's fucking awesome. 12 tracks, 44 minutes. The whole thing has such a coherent vision. Lyrically, it's super confessional and personal. You really feel like this guy is letting you into his life, into his mind, into his struggles, into his pain in such an honest way. And it can be almost shocking at times to have someone be that vulnerable on record. But it's really impactful. And I can't imagine how many people are going to find this record useful and helpful and cathartic. His production as well, I think, has taken a leap forward. Not that it wasn't already fresh, but there's an element of like lush arrangements and kind of a level of musicality going on here that steps away from that more, low-end theory LA beat scene sound, and a really restrained use of samples. Really productive, but really restrained. And I think John Wayne has taken a leap lyrically as well. He's rapping with more of a purpose than on some of the previous records, I think. And there's a maturity and like a clear point of view. And I think it comes from the struggles he's gone through in recent years. I'm sure some of you know about this, but yeah, guy had some problems with alcohol and with anxiety and with travel and sort of stepped off the scene for a few years and got his shit together and got healthy and looked inward. And if this record is the outcome of that, man, he really made that struggle work. He said something that sounded cliche when I saw it, but John Wayne said on Twitter that he really wanted to release this as just one track. I thought that sounded stupid, but it is not stupid. It would make perfect sense because there's such a unifying concept and mood. It makes this project so coherent. It's the sort of thing where it's really hard to kind of drop in and out of. You want to sort of press play and be in John Wayne's world for 44 minutes. I definitely think it's a perfect album to put some headphones on, zone out, maybe light like a soy candle that has some sort of like cardamom scent to it or something on a rainy night. I don't know. I was kind of joking, but it actually sounds kind of nice. But you definitely want to kind of zone out with this and let yourself get into his world and let this dude tell you a story. And of course, it's just a really good banging rap record. It's a John Wayne Rap Album 2. You should be very excited to listen to that. Like I said, a lot of new stuff coming out. And next week, big release. Odyssey has a new record. I will probably be talking about it. I am very excited about it. So listen to it as well, and we can see what we both have to think about it. That is all for this week. Thank you for sticking around. Didn't have audio for you this week because I'm trying to be responsible and make sure I get the okay from the artist when I do that. But you can listen to all these on Spotify, SoundCloud, whatever it is. Give these guys money. Thank you for sticking around. As always, thank you for listening to the podcast. Shouts to Austin and Troy. And just so you know, I have researched it. Pizza is a certified treatment for seasonal depression. Okay, Michael Burns at Michael Burn on Twitter. If you want to hit me up, I'll catch you next week. Bye.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling.
Alrighty, thanks for that, Michael. Austin, do you agree that pizza is the best cure-all for seasonal affective disorder?
You know, I actually have an interesting take on this. So I lived with Michael in Scotland for a little bit. Not nearly as far north as you when you were in Scotland, but we were pretty far north in Scotland, right? And the first time I ever really experienced the seasonal affective disorder, when I was living with Michael. And we got one of those light boxes that we set up in the room. You know, those things, they're these big... I don't even know what kind of light it spews out, but they basically sell themselves as being a substitute for sunlight during those gloomy, dark days of winter. And, you know, that was nice. But you know what really got me through those winter days? Pop
Drinking.
music.
Oh.
Well, that too, but that just made me more depressed. No, pop music. Really cheesy female pop singers. And it started with Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, because I was sitting there. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I saw that the roll of the eye. But it was that song, and then the year after, it was the album by Churches, and then the year after that, I don't remember who it was, but I remember again, it was some female-led happy pop music. Even though Churches has a little bit of teeth to it sometimes, it's still very happy in its sort of aesthetic vibe. So that was my cure for seasonal depression.
You know what you need, dude? If you want synth pop, you need to like go deeper and darker into the sadness.
Like
go bust out The Knife.
Yeah, The Knife. I'm down with The Knife.
That's what I'm all about, man. If you got a feeling, then just exacerbate the feeling, whatever it is, good, bad, indifferent.
Yeah, no, I'm
Radiohead on a sad day. That's what you should do.
Is it possible that you go through the darkness so much that you come out into the happiness? Is that what you're saying?
You have to conquer the darkness.
It's like a transvaluation
like
of values.
George and the Dragon.
Yeah, okay, I got it. It's like overcoming the dichotomy of happiness and sadness altogether till you just become a state of being, right?
Yeah. There is a Hegelian off-Hegelian status to this whole thing. For sure.
Yeah,
going through the antithesis.
That's right. That's right. No, I can be down with some pizza. If it's not pizza, some other types of good cuisine. I do like to cook a lot, so. You know, like last night I made some healthy burritos because it was a dreary day here in Dublin, rainy and gross. So I blasted some Mexican music and made some burritos, and it was great. I had good companionship too, so that probably helped. But you know, so good companionship, you know, some good food, some good music, and that'll get you through the dreary days of seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, I think it was the oxytocin, but you know, whatever you say.
It probably was.
I will cop to pizza being a cure-all for basically everything wrong with the world, though. As long as it's good pizza. Like, bad pizza is utter shit.
Yeah.
But if you find a good, legitimate pizza place, you gotta own that.
You're biased since you used to own a pizza store. So I feel like you have some sort of attachment to the powers, the curing powers of pizza.
No, I would call that authority. Not biased.
That's true.
Of all people, I should not like pizza anymore because I've eaten more pizza than anybody else in the world.
That's true. That is true. Man. All right, what else? You got anything else? Any news that you want to share? Anything happening in the world before we send off?
Nah, man. I mean, I got a cool story I want to tell, but I'm going to save that for the podcast next week. So just everybody be ready for that.
Okay.
A little teaser.
Ooh, I like teasers.
Story time.
I like teasers. All right, cool. All right, well, other than that, thank you for joining us on another episode of Owls at Dawn. Feel free to hit us up on any of our social media outlets, Twitter, Instagram, website, email. Twitter and Instagram is owls_at_dawn. Same with Insta. And you can hit us up through email at owlsatdawnpodcast@gmail.com. T-Roy?
Leave us a review on iTunes if you get a chance. 5-star review. We really appreciate it. Helps us get the podcast out there to the world. Otherwise... Das Vidania, Amerikanski.